Welcome to the Embodied Mystic podcast, where we explore the path of feminine awakening and luscious womanhood. Together, we'll be diving into topics like sacred sexuality, feminine embodiment, spiritual healing, and soulful relationships. I'm your host, Tamar Raphael, tantric mentor and Aries hype girl, here to guide you back to the temple of your body and fall in love with being a woman. I look forward to journeying together. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Embodied Mystic podcast. I'm thrilled to have my lovely friend Krista Marie Starr here with us today. She is such a phenomenal woman and an incredible astrologer. I had the pleasure of having a session with her recently. I had my solar return done with her and it was amazing. So welcome, Krista. I'm so happy to have you.
Thanks, Tamar. So happy to be here.
So I am such a huge fan of astrology. I've always loved it. I used to find my horoscope when I was a little girl in the magazines that I used to read. And I don't know why. It seems like some of us just really love astrology and some of us are really connected to it. And then other people don't get it, think it's not scientific, have all these doubts. I think it's become, maybe a little bit of a, I don't know, a thing that some people think is basic, which I totally disagree with. I totally disagree with, but I know that you have a really deep relationship with astrology and the entire chart. So I'm so curious to hear about your journey with astrology. Like, how did you get started?
I think very similar to you, where when I was a little girl, I would look at, there was these things that I got in Canada, that's where I'm from, where you can get so I'm a Cancer sun, so you can get these little things all rolled up in a tube, and it cost like $1 or something, and then you would roll it out, and it was like once a month, these like rolled out things of like all about your astrology for that month. I remember getting them at the corner store, and I was raised a Christian, and felt really kind of naughty. And there's several times where I even felt a little bit guilty about it, but I was always really curious about that. I was curious about a lot of the things in the esoteric realms, and astrology was definitely not the first part of my study in terms of the esoteric. I would consider myself actually more proficient or more like well-versed in tarot and in the sort of mystic arts of like pagan mysticism that come from my own ancestry, even more so than astrology. But astrology has been kind of like this really interesting thing that I've always read about and learned about, and all my friends I have many friends who are also astrologers, so we'd always be having conversations and like learning and asking questions. And for me, I'm also a lover of maps, which I'll talk about a great deal in our conversation today. Like when I was a little girl, actually even today, I love to read fantasy novels, and my favorite kinds of stories are the ones where you have the map at the front, where you're able to like where's Frodo now? And you go flip to the front of the book, and you're like, oh, he's right here. Okay, he's got a long way to go before he gets to Mordor. Oh shit, and you're following along that way. And I find that things like tarot, for example, is kind of like the path of the soul from the fool to the world, and the sort of things that you're able to experience that kind of give you these symbolized, codified, like snapshots of human experience that you can use as a tool in the minor arcanas and the major arcanas. It's like archetypal energies of the evolution of spirit. And then when it comes to astrology, like it's a map, like your chart is a map. And so I find it endlessly fascinating. And even when I've looked at my own chart like 1,000 million times, and I'm still discovering new things about it, new things about myself. And that's to me like thrilling and fascinating. I love the great mystery. I love the unknown. I love to, and I kind of want the unknown to remain the unknown so I can continue to explore it. And astrology is kind of like that. There's no ending to the unknown to explore, which is exciting to me.
Totally. I mean, yeah, for me, astrology's been an informal study. I guess since I was a little girl, I just slowly got pieces and pieces and pieces.
Mhm.
Yeah, it feels like one of those lifelong passions where I'm
Mhm.
just like always curious. And I love getting solar return readings from different people and
Sure.
having different people look at the chart. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, there's just infinite amounts of information in that little circle.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with that. Having different perspectives and different voices and different viewpoints, it's immensely helpful. Even for myself, I read tarot for a living. I read charts for a living, and still I go to readers and I go to other people because their perspective is it's like you can't look at your own eyes. You know, you have to have something to mirror it to you. Um, so I totally agree with you on that.
I was just thinking, Krista, you're definitely, in my eyes, an embodied mystic.
Mm.
Um, I love having people on the podcast and being able to say, like, yep, you are an embodied mystic. Like, thank you for being here.
You know something kind of funny actually?
Mm.
When you told me the name of your podcast, I kind of had a bit of a giggle because I've been creating a school, like a mystery school, that I've called Temple of Wild Light, School of Embodied Mysticism. And so when you told me your name was like the embodied mystic, I'm like, well, yeah, that is something I definitely want to be a part of. Uh-huh. Because there is this thing. And, actually, earlier today when I was like contemplating what I would want to talk about on this podcast with you today, and I was thinking about that term embodied mystic and how actually radical it is for these times. Because most people are not embodied, and
Mm.
most people have completely lost touch with spirit, with the esoteric, with like the unseen realms, with the deeper aspects of reality. And people live in a very sanitized, very dull, structured, like unexplored life. And
Mm.
that's to actually awaken into the body is to awaken into spirit. Like the two are not separate.
Mm.
The
Mm-hmm.
tradition of yoga that I come from is Kashmir Shaivism, where we understand that actually your body is vibrating at just denser frequency than your spirit. That actually they're on a spectrum. That they are two of the same thing. They are two of the one. You
Mm.
know. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I love the name of your podcast. I fully resonate. Embodied mystic for sure.
Thank you, love. And yeah, I definitely feel it's I mean, in some way it's like embodied and mystic. Like when we think of what a mystic is, there's this tendency to really yeah, like to go into those upper chakras and for everything to be very ethereal and expanded.
Mhm.
Um and I think like to hold that and to really journey in those realms and to also maintain this like strong connection with the root and with earth and our body, and to do the work with our sexuality and to do the work with our power and to just stay grounded. Like that's a lot of people trip up there.
Oh, 100%. Like 100%. I've been in the industry of spirituality and healing and teaching for, you know, 13 years now. Like I've been teaching yoga and working in trauma and doing counseling work, and as well as diving deeply into the more mystic arts of, you know, magic and astrology and ritual and ceremony and all of that. And what you see often is two things with people. is in this realm is like, on the one hand, there's lots of people who can go up and out. They can go into these really mystical states where they're like their third eye is blown open and they're talking all the talk. They can, they're wearing all the feathers and dripping in crystals, and but their capacity to actually function in their life is very minimal, and they have all this unprocessed trauma, and they have all of this, like, their relationships are a mess and they can't handle their finances. Yeah, it's just like all upper chakras. But you also see this element where people are constantly regurgitating their trauma. Like, I worked in as a trauma therapist for years and years, and the amount of times, like, people were just coming back again and again and again and again and again and again, and like they lose decades of their life to constantly purging out their trauma and their darkness. And what I've learned is that, like, well, first of all, like, once you've done healing your trauma, then you have your ancestors' trauma, and then you've got your karmic past life trauma, and then you've got the trauma of your culture, and then you've got the trauma of humanity, and then you've got the trauma of all of history. It's like literally never ending. Like, we can do that work endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can bury your head in the sand and try to avoid it all, or you can actually learn how to embody, like, fully and completely the aliveness of like the full spectrum of life, and attend to things that need to be attended to, while still, yeah, staying grounded and embodied, dealing with the things that you need to deal with, opening up to different states of consciousness, asking questions like, what is God? Why are we alive? Why are we here? What's my purpose in life? And just to kind of tie it back into astrology, this is one of the things that, like, I love about looking at a chart. Because a chart, if you look at a person's chart, if you, like, it looks like a so for those that are listening right now, your astrology chart is like this big circle. It looks like a pie, and it's divided into these 12 quadrants that are called houses. And the line that's on the horizon, or the line that goes straight across, it sets what's called your rising sign or your ascendant on the left, and then the right is called the descendant. And that is literally the horizon line on the earth. So talking about, like, this is a map of the stars, but it's a map of the stars in relation to the earth. So you can see that actually the idea of embodied mysticism is exactly what an astrology chart is. It is the stars, or the esoteric realms, as expressed from the perspective of somebody on the earth at the moment of their birth. So I think that's also, like, a really cool way of understanding and, like, looking at a chart and looking at the, like, looking at it's like the microcosm to the macrocosm. Like, we are spirit in form. We are, like, consciousness embodied, or rather our bodies are like living consciousness themselves. And, like, our astrology then in the macrocosm is that we're like, the earth is our body, and the stars are, like, the thing that helped to map us out.
So gorgeous.
Mhm.
I'm, like, beaming. So beautiful. Oh, yeah, I loved that visual of the chart that you gave. So, yeah, Krista, for someone who is longing to, like, find some support on their spiritual journey, on their soul path, and want to look to the stars, like, they want to learn from what astrology has to offer, where can they start?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to, again, I'm a huge fan of maps, and I love to make things simple. I'm also a teacher by nature, so I can do a bit of teaching here. So there's, like, two routes that you can go when it comes to astrology. One is that you can learn how to read a chart yourself, and that's pretty awesome. And I'll speak to, like, what is a basic beginner way that you can, like, look at a chart and make sense of it, and what are some things that you can begin to work with now that will start to develop your skills with that. But then the second route you can do is you can just find an astrology to work with, and that's also really awesome. Like, not everyone.
Krista.
Yeah. Well, you don't need to, like, not everybody needs to learn everything. Like, I find like architecture really fascinating. I love looking at really amazing buildings. Do I need to know everything about architecture for me to appreciate it? Well, no. So there's different pathways I can along this, and so I just want to like put it out there that not everyone, you can love astrology and not need to know everything about it. You can still like,
Absolutely.
yeah, like dabble into it. That's totally wonderful. But for those that want to kind of learn a little bit, so let's start with just like how to look at a chart and how to, and what is a chart? Why do we even want to look at a chart? Um, Typically people have gone to astrology readings for the most part, like historically, for divination, for learning about what's going to happen. Another way, in more modern times, we've kind of done a bit more of the psychological, like from the birth of like psychology has come of like looking at astrology through the lens of the psyche and like the lens of, different aspects of personality that we can embody and, that sort of deal. But the way that I personally like to look at a chart in the way that me and you have spoken about before is that it is the map of the architecture of the soul. So as your spirit comes into form, it needs to take some shape. And the shape that it takes is through these imprints of experiences that you might want to call samskaras or karma from like the Indian traditions
Mm.
uh, of perspective, or also in Buddhist, we talk about that also. And then we have all the different, qualities that we've perhaps experienced in previous lifetimes, or, if you want to go down into that, you don't have to believe in past lives in order to appreciate astrology. But if it's something that you want to explore, that's there too.
Mm.
There's
And
different.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating too. And like, it's really, really cool. Really cool too is when you start to do synastry charts, when you're looking at one person's chart against another person's chart, and you can see where they might have had past lives and like what their work is in this lifetime together. It gets really cool. Sometimes I geek out and like, we'll just look at random people's like charts and be like, I wonder, like, just because
Oh
it's
my God, I
fun.
love it. I'm
Ah,
so here for that.
yeah. Okay, so we have this chart. It looks like a pie, and it's divided into 12, sections that are like aspects of self or aspects of life that we can experience. And then you have what are called like, or like, so I wanted to go into, yeah, we have the planets. So we have your sun, your moon, your rising. So those are the three that most people have at least a basic understanding of. And then you have Mars, Mercury, and Venus. And those are more of, again, really deeply personal planets, really help to define your personality. And then you have a bit more of the peripheral, like the teacher ones that are like Saturn and Jupiter. And then you have the more even further away ones, which are like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And
Mm.
so just learning those, if you like were to understand the houses and which each house means, like the first one is about the body and the sense of self and the ego. The second house is about resources and sense of self-worth and money. The third house is communication and community and your sisters and your brothers and your close network and onward all the way along. So if you were to memorize those 12 houses, and then learn about the planets and how each planet kind of has a personality. Like
Mm.
Saturn is a bit of a weighty, really strict, brings a lot of like presence and power, but will like kind of smack your butt and put you to task.
Big
Well,
Daddy energy.
totally, Big Daddy, 100%. Um, well, like, Uranus is more of the like the unknown. He's the wild card, the energy that comes into your life, and like, anything that you thought was for sure 100% like set in stone, Uranus comes in and like kind of puts you through a whirlwind for positive, negative. Who knows? You never know. Anytime you see Uranus somewhere in like in someone's chart really strongly aspected, or if someone's going through a Uranus cycle, which I currently am, which has been pretty wild, you kind of have to be like, well, we'll see. Like there's kind of like this unknown element of like, who knows? Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, you kind of like learn about the houses and you learn about the planets, and then from there you can like look at your chart and be like, ah, I have like Tamar, I'm looking at your chart right now. You know, you have your Venus in Taurus in the ninth house. So Venus is like, you know, your sense of one way of seeing it is that as a woman, you would perceive your Venus as a way that you experience or express your feminine nature, and where you feel the most like you can really embody yourself as a woman, based on what's happening in your chart in relation to your Venus. And so you have Venus in the ninth house in Taurus. So ninth house is you know, wisdom and knowledge and study, but also like wide travel, that you might actually experience yourself as a woman through the more like wide vistas you explore. And the more that you learn and you understand, there's something that ignites in you in that way because of being in the ninth house and what that represents. But then it being in Taurus is going to be the filter, the Taurian filter, which is also very sensual and loves to be like tactile and wants to be touched and held. Like your language, your love language is probably touch. You know, you
Yes.
yeah, you probably love gardens and you know, anything sensual, anything tactile, anything full of beauty. You want lusciousness. You know,
Mm,
that's one way of perceiving yourself. Am I hitting the mark?
totally. Actually, so funny. Like in the introduction for the podcast,
Mhm.
I referenced luscious womanhood.
Oh, wonderful. Well, that's
So
because you're
it's
you
like,
have Venus and Taurus. That is you. And but not every, and this is also a really interesting thing, is like as you start to learn about the different parts of your chart, you're like, oh yes, that's totally me. And then you learn like somebody who has like Taurus and Gemini, or sorry, Taurus, Gemini, either Venus and Gemini will experience themselves as a woman completely different. They're
mm,
probably not going to be really interested in like luscious, sensual, whatever. Like the Venus and Gemini person is very playful and very cerebral and needs to kind of play the field and try new things. And they're more likely to want to try things like polyamory, or to try to, they probably date a lot of people before they actually find somebody that feels like they want to spend their life with. You know,
mm.
Venus and Gemini will require a lot of like communication and a lot of like chats, and they probably talk a lot after bed, being in bed together. You know, like that's a way that they can experience themselves. Not
Mhm.
always. It also depends on what other things are happening in your chart. But um, so it's really interesting where, like, when we learn about one part of ourselves in our chart, we realize that what might have been like, oh, all women need lusciousness, all women need sensuality. And it's just like, well, no, actually, this is what
Mm,
myself as a woman needs. So
mm,
what does like what where are the Venuses in all of my friends' charts, I wonder?
mm.
And like how do they experience themselves as a woman, and how can they express themselves and feel like really empowered, really embodied, as the woman that they are? It's really fascinating to see it that way.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love getting my hands on the chart of
Mhm.
everyone that I care about
Yeah.
because I love like getting to see that it's almost like this blueprint and it's like, okay, wow, so much information. And then kind of piecing together what I know about astrology, which is like gradually increasing, but it's been slow. Yeah,
Yeah.
to really just look at it and be like, wow, yeah, I really recognize that about them. And that really teaches me something about like who they are on a deeper level. And
Yeah.
it's, yeah, there's like so much to learn with astrology, but it's also, you can get a long way with just a little bit of information. And I find that so like exciting.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Okay, so next step. So far we've learned the houses and then we've learned the planets. Next step, for those of you who want to learn, I would suggest then you start to learn things that are called aspects.
Oh
So
yeah,
that's
this is what I'm currently, this is like my edge of growth.
Yeah. And so aspects are like the way, so if you look at a chart, it looks like a pie, and then you have these different symbols in different parts of the chart in different like pie pieces. And then there will be all these that like usually red or blue lines between the symbols, and those represent the aspects. So there's all sorts of aspects. So you can get really nitpicky about like very, you know, yeah. I'm going to speak to like the important four. Some schools only talk about three aspects, but I'm going to include the trine and maybe the sextile also. But like the ones that you are really, specifically when you're experiencing a transit, so that's when one planet that's currently in the sky is activating one of your like pie pieces, one of your little symbols in the pie piece. That it's like it's called a transit. So something in the sky is transiting or aspecting something in your natal, so your birth chart.
Mm.
And for
So
that, you generally want to look. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just want to like make sure that it's super, super clear because I know it can be so confusing. So,
No,
okay. So a transit is when like something's going on in the sky right
right now.
now. Like, say, if we're looking at a current transit,
Yes,
something's going on up there in the stars right
yes.
now. And
Mhm.
we want to see how it directly interacts with our personal natal chart.
Correct. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So that's a transit. Which I might have like jumped ahead by talking about that because I really want to let you look at like teach you how to like look at your own chart. But we'll speak to a transit. So yeah, transits are like when you're looking at the things that are happening in the sky and seeing how it affects your personal chart. And
Mm,
with that, the three um, forms of aspects that are usually the strongest and the ones that you really want to look out for are one are called conjunctions, and
mhm.
that is where like the planet is on top of where your planet is. So if like I'm currently experiencing a Uranus conjunct my Venus. So Uranus, the planet of like the great wild unknown, is right on top of my
No.
natal Venus, of
Oh my
like my
gosh.
womanhood. I know it's exciting. It's really exciting. Who knows
Good,
what's going
good,
to
good.
happen? I have no idea. Talk to me a year from now. Who knows what my life will look like? Um, so that's a conjunction.
So, okay. So in the stars, it looks like they're on top of each other, but in the chart, is it that they're next to each other?
So it's no, it'll look like they're on top of each other because it's on your
Oh,
natal chart. So it's not like
okay.
my Venus isn't in Taurus right now. It's like like
Uh-huh.
the transit versus like um, so yeah, it's a transit as opposed to
Okay.
something actually
Oh,
happening.
right.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes, yeah. See, I'm
yeah.
getting confused. Okay.
I know I know. So for those of you listening, it's okay if you're confused right now. All is well. Um, I'm going to simplify it
Okay.
one more time.
Mhm.
Okay. So in the sky, there are things moving around. Stars and planets doing their thing, having a dance in the sky like the cosmic magic beings that they are. And as they hit certain points that when you were born, one of the planets happened to be, then it's called a transit to your natal chart. And the three ones that I want to talk about are conjunctions. That's when, like, again, the planet is on top of where that a certain aspect in your chart used to be.
Yeah, okay. And it looks like it's outside of the chart when you look
Uh-huh.
at,
Yes,
okay, cool. That makes
yes,
sense now. Okay.
yes, yeah. And then, so that's a conjunction. Then you have an opposition. And that's when they're like exactly opposite of the pie. And then you have a square, and that's where it creates a 90-degree angle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
like you could draw like a right angle between the
yes,
thing transiting and
yes,
something in your natal chart.
correct. Yes.
It's
And so
very
with
mathsy,
very mathsy.
very
So
mathematical.
we'll get the math part out of the way. You can dive endlessly into it. A lot of people who love math really love astrology. That's one doorway into it. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not the doorway that I love. The doorway that I love is more of like the realm of the mythic and the realm of the esoteric, which I will get to in just 2 seconds. Um, but it is kind of a really cool thing when you're able to like actually look at the aspects in your chart and things that are transiting. you know, because I was just talking about transits, but then when you're actually looking at your chart, you can see of like, ah, yes. It's like, so Tamar, for you, some aspects that you have in your chart are you have your moon conjunct your Mercury. So there's this natural ability for you. So that's where like the moon and Mercury, when you were born, were very, very close together. They're only like 4 degrees away from each, or 5 degrees away from each other. So that's it's a loose-ish conjunction. It's not directly on top. They're not like at the exact same degree, but they're quite close. So it's considered a conjunction. You can also see it as like I like to say that those two aspects in the planet were making love.
Mm.
Well, in an opposition, they're having an argument, and in the square, they've like turned away from each other. They've got some serious work to do. You know, I'm joking, not joking. But like with your moon and your Mercury in your natal chart as a conjunction, you can like that's a new like an even deeper way you can understand yourself. If you have this natural ability to communicate and to voice your inner world, and that actually your inner world represented by the moon, like your unconscious, the deeper aspects of yourself, the way that you understand yourself. That it being able to be you will feel more like yourself, and you'll feel more at peace within your own inner world when you're able to actually share and express in a very clear and very communicative way what your inner world is like, you know. So that's one way you can kind of a deepening of your understanding of yourself when you're looking at this chart. And so kind of just to kind of come back to now getting into more of the like the mythic and the esoteric aspects, and like and kind of moving away from the math stuff because that can be a lot. But once you've like learned, so again, so 3 steps that you can do to like learn how to read and look at your chart is understanding the houses, understanding the planets, and then understanding aspects. And then when you look at your chart, you can be like, oh, look, there's this aspect of myself. Cool. How can I learn about that and know myself deeper? And where I find the charts super fascinating, going back to this, like, you know, analogy of the architecture, the map of the architecture of the soul, is we can see it as like in this architecture, you've got all sorts of snakes and ladders, all sorts of things where like you might have a propensity to kind of fall in this area of your life, or here you have a natural gift, or here you have a quality that will help you, or here you have a quality that maybe you need to work on. And none of it is like, I don't like to think of it as bad or negative or like you're doomed or you know any of that, but rather when you start to learn about yourself, you learn about ways that you can navigate this crazy thing we call life, and make different kinds of decisions, or maybe just understand why we make decisions the way that we do, instead of, you know, um, leaving it into the unconscious realms, or as Carl Jung famously says, until we make the unconscious conscious, it will rule our life and we will call it fate. But oftentimes, instead of trying to look at it, I want to know the future, it's just like, well, can we know ourselves?
Mm.
And when we know
Yes.
ourselves and we know our souls and we know what we're here to do and why, which, you know, the chart can really help us with, um, then the unknown becomes exciting rather than like this terrible, ominous, foreboding thing that we have to put into a box as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and you were excited.
Hmm.
You know, you're excited about your Uranus Venus thing.
Oh, yeah.
We felt it.
Yeah. I am.
It's
Exciting is
like,
really
wow.
Yeah, I can get to get nerdy about my own chart. So Uranus is going like back and forth. So I have both my North Node, which I'm going to talk about a great deal in a moment. I know that you want to talk about them, so we'll talk about those. But my North Node and my Venus are like within 4 degrees of each other.
My gosh.
And so Uranus is already past my North Node once, and it's now just almost like in the next week, it's going to be directly on top of my Venus. And then Uranus is going to go retrograde,
Oh
and so
my
it's going to go
gosh.
back over, and then it's going to go over again once it goes direct. And I think it does that like a total of 5 times. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So
No.
this next year is going to be like a wild one for me. You know, the North.
Wow.
Yeah, wow, indeed. Like, who knows? I have no idea.
My
Hmm.
gosh. I
Hmm.
feel like like knowing ourselves, like getting to know ourselves more deeply, for me anyway, it's brought so much freedom.
Yeah,
And
totally.
I feel so much more comfortable um actually in relationship with others,
Mm.
because I feel like I'm so much clearer about who I am and what
Mhm.
I need and what I want and what's important. And I think before, things used to feel so much more watery and flowy and open and let's see and let's feel, and now I'm like, yeah, let's feel, but these are the parameters. Like I know what I need, and it gives so much spaciousness just to know.
Yeah,
And I
sure.
experience, like, in relationship with others, it also brings others relief.
Mm.
They're like, wow, you you really know like what you need and what you want. And I, yeah, that's why I support so much almost anything that supports us with our inner work
Yeah.
and helps us get to know each other and ourselves.
Yes. Oh, I love that. 100%. And I'm curious, Tamar, like, because we did that reading together. I did a reading for you last week, and I would
Mm,
love to hear, like, I know that there's things that you wanted to dive into more in this conversation. I would love to hear from you of like, from the reading, what did you really get out of it that really helped you in this way, and like the ways that you're speaking, and um, just maybe might help the people listening to understand
mm,
why this might help them and what your experience was, and in what way maybe some of the things that we talked about I can really make sure I
mm.
speak to.
Okay, now I need to like cast my mind back to our reading. Yeah,
Mhm.
like what I'm really remembering
Mhm.
was like the emphasis that you shared. And it's fascinating because it actually really relates again to this like embodied mystic thing.
Mhm.
And so what you were sharing with me and just really emphasizing is about how the embodied, the grounded, the sensual, the tactile is really what I know and where
Mhm.
my foundation is.
Yes.
Um, and how I am moving on my soul's journey deeper into the mystic and, the high priestess archetype and the shaman, and how life is going to encourage me and also push me if I don't follow that.
Mhm.
And yeah, you just really sharing about how that will intensify
Mhm.
for me. Like felt that felt fascinating for
Sure,
me, and
yeah.
I kind of didn't expect it in a way.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, so that journey, so I was talking about the north nodes, which is what you're speaking of right now. And if you look on your chart, it'll look like the north node will look like kind of like a upside down horseshoe, or like a
mm,
horseshoe that's the circle part is pointing up and it's got, and the two pointy parts towards the bottom with two little circles at the end. I don't know how else to describe it. That's like the north node. So when you're looking at a chart, you can find that out. And the nodes are, they're not actual planets, or they are calculated points based on the movement of the moon, the ecliptical of the moon. And so eclipses that happen every year will happen in relation to where the nodes are. So
mm,
that's as a way of kind of understanding it a little bit. And the north node is sort of like the direction that your soul has chosen to move towards, to learn from, to grow into in this lifetime. While your south node is what's familiar. You've done that work. You like, it's not something you need to let go of. It's not something you need to necessarily shed, but rather it's like a comfortable pair of shoes that you can always go back to and use if necessary. But it's time to actually put on a different jacket now. It's time to put on a different pair of boots and like learn how to walk in a different way.
mm,
Um, and just to use your own chart, for example, you have your south node is in Taurus and your north node is in Scorpio. And I love that because me and you have the exact opposite. Like my north node is in Taurus and my south node is in Scorpio, which is really funny how we've both named our own projects embodied mystics and the embodied mysticism, because it's quite literally like that is the Taurus Scorpio axis. So the nodes
Totally.
always happen in the opposite sign. So it's like in opposition. So it'll be, you know, Aries
Libra.
and Libra, and Taurus and Scorpio, Gemini, Sagittarius, and onwards all the way back. So it's like, yeah, in opposition to each other. And each of those axes, kind of, you can look at your rising sign and your descendant. So your rising is the point on the horizon that was rising on the horizon the moment you were born, and your descendant is what was kind of going below the horizon line. And that axis is a really telltale sign of like what you're looking for in partnership, and is considered like
Mm.
a very powerful indicator of the kind of like partnership that you're really looking for. It's really fascinating also.
Mm.
Um, and there's different ways of like, understanding that. So it's not just that. You can't just look at like, oh, my descendant is in this, therefore this is the kind of partnership I want. But like, well, no, you also need to look at where's your Venus, what's happening in your fourth house, what's happening in your seventh. Do you
Mm.
have some unresolved issues in different part of your chart that you need to fix first before you can enter partnership? There's lots of these like it's like a jigsaw puzzle sometimes. Um,
Totally.
yeah, but the nodes, like I find I always look at like certain points when I'm reading somebody's chart as a way of understanding, okay, so here's they're on the great journey, their hero's journey in this lifetime. And here is the map of their soul's journey that they need to like
Oh.
sort out. And like there's certain things, certain transits that happen in life, like your Saturn return, and then you
Mm.
have your nodal return, your north node return. You have Pluto square. You have Uranus opposition. You have these key pieces that happen along
Mm.
in a person's life that kind of like activate certain parts of your
Mm.
charts that you're kind of forced to deal with your shit.
Mm. Is
Um,
Saturn return the first one,
um,
or not necessarily?
Not necessarily, but that's the first one
Mm.
that people usually really feel deeply. There's definitely like the before your Saturn return and then your after. And you
Yeah.
might not even feel it. Like for me in my Saturn return, I didn't feel it. I didn't notice it. I wasn't like, oh, like I'm really in the thick of it right now. It actually happened quite gracefully for me. But I can look back now and see, whoa, that
Mm.
time was massively transformative. And there was the me before, and then my life completely transformed afterwards. So it's one of those major points because in your 20s, you're doing so much like evolution and your trials and errors and all of that. So Saturn
Mm.
comes around and kind of puts you to task a little bit in your Saturn return.
Yeah, I'm there now.
Yes,
Kind
you
of.
are. You are. You're getting there. It's getting really like super, super close. So you're like 1 degree off
Oh,
looking at
damn.
you're oh yeah, less than that. Like it's happening for you, darling. You are in it. It's great.
Ooh.
Yoo-hoo! Yeah. But with our north node and our south node, like it's you know always a fascinating thing to look at and look at where it is in your chart. So it's like the sign, but then also the house.
Mm.
That will make a big impact. What other planets are around it? What are the nodes having a conversation with in terms of other things happening in your chart? It's really like a fascinating thing, and I find like for me is one of those really significant things that teaches you like if you're not living in accordance to what your soul is meant to learn in this lifetime, then like you might have a hard time in other aspects. Not always, but like
Mm.
you're definitely like your north node is a symbol of the leading edge of evolution that you're here to do. And so if you're in resistance to that, it's like, it's going to be difficult. But when you kind of like learn about what am I here to evolve into? What are some of the lessons I'm here to learn and the tools I'm here to develop? And you're looking at your chart and you're like, okay, here's this difficult thing in my chart. I got Chiron doing this thing or Pluto doing that thing, and that's really challenging. But I can see that it's a teacher. And that's
Mm,
one thing that I like to see of some of these planets is even the more difficult ones. Like people love to hate on Pluto, people love to hate on Saturn because they're difficult. They're like big Maha teachers, big mega heavy lifting teachers. Like you go through a Pluto transit, that's like death and rebirth. That's transformation.
mm,
That is reclaiming power when you've lost it. That is Anana going into the underworld and arising once again. That is, you know, a massive journey. Um, but instead of seeing it as like this like ominous dark force that is doing bad things to you, rather that they are teachers here
mm,
to activate things in you so that you can evolve, that you can grow. And whether it's one versus the other, like we can talk about, is life um, predestined, or do we have any sort of agency? That's a deep question to ask, especially for those that are interested in divination and understanding the journey of life. Um, and I am definitely beyond the scope of what we can cover in this conversation. But one thing that I can say for sure is that even if everything is predestined and we've got zero agency, where we can find control, where we can find a semblance of agency is when we choose to see things in the way that we choose to perceive things.
mm.
So, you can choose to see Saturn and Pluto as these big bad bullies, or you can choose to see them as teachers that help you to evolve. And when you choose that perspective,
Mm.
yeah, it's a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. It connects for me to this like um mindset that is like the guru is everywhere. It's like open your eyes. The guru is everywhere. The teacher is everywhere. Like life is always um yeah, like trying to penetrate us with knowledge and wisdom and
Mhm.
insight and growth. And
Mhm.
sometimes just seeing that and surrendering to that is the most challenging thing for a lot
Mhm.
of people, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, One tool that I've learned that helps me a great deal is that thank you is the answer to everything. And that, especially when I'm in the thick of a massive piece of transformation or evolution or a dark night of the soul or a moment where I feel like my life is crumbling, if I'm able to find a space where I can drop down to my knees and just say, thank you for my life. Thank you for life. Thank you for my life. I'm so glad I'm alive. I'm so glad I'm in a body. I'm so glad for the sun and the moon. I'm so glad that I get to drink this coffee and that I get to, you know, listen to the sound of rain outside my window. And that when I'm able to drop into that space of saying thank you for the things that are easy to say thank you for, that it ends up being a doorway where like I can start to say thank you to these teachers. Thank you to this challenge. Thank you to this pain. Thank you to this moment of crises that I can make choices that are more in alignment with integrity or more in alignment with compassion. I'm able to develop skills like discernment and forgiveness. That thank you, life. Thank you, life. Thank you to all of life, the whole of life. It's so messy and it's so painful sometimes, and it's so beautiful and it's so tragic and it makes no sense, but holy, holy mother effer, is it ever exquisite. Thank you, life. And so I come again and again, and I bow again and again to the rivers and the trees and the stars and the sky. And I bow to this earth and I say, thank you. Thank you to this life. And I find that when I am able to, that this tool of thank you is the like most profound source of resilient aliveness, strength, and like sanctuary that I can find. Mhm.
Beautiful. And
Mhm.
that for me is embodied mysticism.
Mhm. 100%. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's the key, like we look to the stars and we read our charts and we ask our questions and we pull our cards. Um, but ultimately, what it, truthfully, Tamar, what it all brings me back down to is like letting me worship life,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And we've all gone through difficult times. I know I have. And things that I wish were another way, wish of things I could change. And I can look in the world in these times right now and ask why. And, and it can be hard. It can hard to feel like empowered. It can hard to feel like there's hope.
Mm-hmm.
I think that to be embodied mystics means that we have to be willing to ask those deeper questions of why and what for, to ask the deeper questions of, who do we call out to when the night is dark and our hearts are in pain, and we develop relationships with the stars or with spirit or with God, with our ancestors. We build these relationships, we call out and we ask the questions, but then we draw it back down into how we live. We
Mm-hmm.
allow it to knit its way, that wisdom and that understanding, that luminosity that comes from that mystic state, that rapturous state, that trance-like state that we can enter when we walk through the doors of the temple of life into the great mystery. We pull threads of that luminosity and we weave them into our blood and bones. We sing them through our songs. Um, we pour them into our food and how we love each other. And and this is what gives me hope. And this is what gives me a sense of power in turbulent times.
Mm-hmm.
And um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
astrology is not just for self-help and not just for, you know, fluffy, you know, fluffy stuff. It can be
Mm-hmm.
a, it can be a deep source um, of sanctuary, of empowerment, and of prayer ultimately.
Oh my gosh, that was so beautiful. I feel my womb. Like I feel like I'm about to get my period like right now. Just from listening, my womb is like, ah, the
Mhm.
priestess is speaking. Silence, please. Now go to
Oh.
bed and rest.
Oh, you're so.
uh so so beautiful.
Mhm.
Um yeah, seeing as our nodes are reversed, so your south node is in Scorpio and your
Mhm.
north node is in Taurus.
Yes.
So that's like your previous experience has been more scorpionic, so more about like the underworld and the transformational and going into the dark to find the gold. Um,
Mhm.
and
Yep.
yeah, now you're moving towards, or like your soul is pointing you in a direction that's more easeful
Mhm.
and slow and connected to the body.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And
how is that for you? Like how's that journey been and what's helped you?
that's a great question. Um, Yeah, well, definitely and I've got what's called a stellium in Scorpio. So a stellium is when three or more major things are in either one sign or one house or both. So I have um, a lot of stuff happening in Scorpio. So and most of it are points that speak to past lives. Sometimes you can look at your moon, and your moon gives you some indication of like your past life. Same with Pluto, and same with the South Node. In different schools of astrology, depending on who you're talking to. And all three of them plus Saturn are in Scorpio for me. So I have this heaviness there. And it is a heaviness because like Pluto is conjunct my moon, which is Pluto conjunct moon in Scorpio. Anyone who knows astrology hears that and you're like, oosh, you're like, oh, it's a heavy one. So having all this Scorpio, so it's like this natural propensity for me to go into like depth. And you can even look at my career, for example, and I just had my nodal return. I'm just finishing on my birthday, which is in 2 weeks from now, where your North Node goes back to its original position when you were born.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
By the way, before I forget.
Yeah. And so nodal return is kind of like it's a very beneficial transit. It's one where you're like, woohoo! Like this is where blessings and boons and like you kind of having like a chiropractor appointment for your destiny sort of deal. And how I've kind of experienced it is like in my career for years and years and years, I worked as a somatic therapist in a trauma center. I was also teaching yoga at studios, and I had my own business running retreats, and I did all this esoteric work in my own as a private practice, um, and but yeah, for years and years, and not just like there's trauma with a lowercase t, and then there's trauma with a big T,
Mm-hmm.
I worked a lot with trauma with a big T, so some pretty severe mental health issues and um, you know extreme stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I it was something that came very naturally to me. And I would literally be able to hold people in my arms as they like in the most extreme experiences. And there was very little that a person um, like I can't think of anything that a person can tell me that I would not be able to be there with them
Mm-hmm.
in, you know. My capacity to do that work is quite deep and profound. And um, but what I found in the journey of moving towards my North Node, where like, learning that not everything that's deep needs to be dark,
Totally.
and not everything that is profound has to be heavy and has to have like a massive trial form of initiation to it. That
Mm-hmm.
actually, for me, what I've learned when it comes to stepping into my more Taurian North Node is that sometimes depth is radiant. And sometimes initiation can be through joy. And what I am finding is like actually I'm becoming an artist. And next week I've been invited to do live painting at an event with several hundred people there. I'm going to be bringing one of my
Oh.
paintings. And paintings is something that I've just started doing in the last couple of years, just during the pandemic when I couldn't work and I would just sit at home looking at the jungle here in Bali and I would paint. And now it's starting to come through and I'm learning music and I'm spending time in nature. And it's more of like my path is like the depth and being able to navigate darkness is something that I will always have and always be able to do and always something I can draw from. But um, I even had one of my mentors recently say, Krista, no more trauma work. Like you've paid your dues. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not your job anymore. Like, yes, if people that the students that come to you and the people that are like clients that they have trauma, then you having those tools to help them with that, wonderful. But your path now is different. Now you're walking a path of beauty. Now you're here to walk a path of yeah, the beauty way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for you, it's not like you're going to be that sense of like sensuality and slowness and lusciousness and beauty and love of connection to the body and nature and pleasure. It's not like you're going to have to leave that behind
I could
in order
never.
for you to fulfill your destiny. Like, well, no, you couldn't. How could you? It's like cutting
Never.
off an arm. How could you possibly? No. So yeah, it'll always be like a part of who you are and a part of how you operate through life. But it won't be your modus operandi. It'll be a place that you can naturally draw from, and that your work is actually to edge into a place of like power. You know, Scorpio really is the sign of power and of transformation and of evolution and of the esoteric and the great unknown. And that's that will be told for you through this like
Geckos.
recognition. The gecko, well, the gecko, he's agreeing. He's agreeing.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, wow.
Yeah. Hmm. So yeah, this Scorpio and Taurus axis. So I really love how we actually have the opposite. It's like I'm able to embody something that you're edging into, and you're able to embody something that I'm edging into. That it's a really beautiful way of like we have like things to learn from each other, and then things that we can help each other with, which is such a beautiful thing.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Mhm.
love it. It's just been so fascinating to have this conversation and yeah, like notice the symmetry and then the symmetry with the embodied mystic stuff and how that so
Mhm.
perfectly maps onto the Taurus Scorpio axis. And I feel for anyone listening to this podcast, and if you've listened to the other episodes, like these are energies that are very much present here. Like, this is what we're talking about. It's this kind of stuff. And Scorpio is also sex.
Mhm.
Woohoo!
Oh, 100%.
Sex
100.
and the soul and death and the taboo. And we love it.
Yes.
We love
Yes. Uh-huh. And really fascinating for you, Tamar, just to bring your own chart back into it again, is so Pluto also kind of indicates a sort of past life thing. And Pluto, if you have a strong Pluto, anything in your chart, you have a Scorpio-ish kind of quality to your chart.
it.
And for you, your Pluto is conjunct your North Node, which is fascinating because that kind of indicates that not only is this something that you're meant to step into in this lifetime, but it's also like you are going back to complete something that you've done before. So this is not your first time kind of in the stepping into the Scorpio realms. This is something that you actually are familiar with, but you're here in this lifetime to reclaim a piece of power that perhaps you need to like sharpen again, or there's a piece that you've forgotten in another part of your life. And um, so it's a fascinating thing. So it's an extra element of power and transformation to your North Node. It's like
Mm.
a very powerful and
Yeah.
transformative aspect in your chart for sure.
You know, you totally read my mind, mystic style. Because
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, this will probably be one of the last questions.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about like past life stuff and where in the chart can we get hints about that for those who believe in it. I totally believe in it. So I'm asking
Mhm.
this question for those who do and feel
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah. So again, like the 3 points that usually have some glimmer of past life information is your South Node, Pluto, and your Moon. So
Mm,
it's kind of ways that you can kind of there's one school that says like your Moon is so your South Node is kind of like um, the tribe that you used to be in your past life, and
yeah.
that your Moon was the job that you
Mm-hmm.
had in that tribe, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, that's one way of seeing it. And Pluto usually indicates like Pluto very much is about karma. So if there is, that's why I said when I'm like your North Node being conjunct your Pluto, there's some sort of past life karma of uncompletion that is going to be resolved through this lifetime of you stepping more into your North Node, more into your Scorpio like essence. And that through that, you'll reclaim a lot of lost power because Pluto is also always about power, power and karma, death, transformation, all of that beautiful, awesome Scorpio stuff. Um, and you have, your moon in Aries, and it's trine both Pluto and your, no, just Pluto. your north node's there too, but mostly trine your Pluto. And so a trine, so another aspect. So I said the three of like conjunction, opposition, and square, and those are usually the strongest. And then there's more easeful ones, like a trine and a sextile and a semi-sextile, and onwards we're more math stuff, so we won't worry about it too much. But trines are also they're very beneficial. They usually like that aspect is like the two planets are sort of like helping each other. They're giving each other some like good information, which I find I have my Mars in Cancer and my Moon in Scorpio, and Mars hates being in Cancer, and
Mm,
Moon does not like being in Scorpio. But for me, my Moon and my Mars are trying each other, so I kind of see it as like they're in each other's opposite signs because Moon actually belongs to Cancer and Mars belongs to Scorpio, at least traditionally.
mm,
And so
mm-hmm.
they're now in the opposite signs, but they're
Mm.
trying each other. So they're just like teaching each other. They're helping each other out,
Yeah,
And for
totally.
you, yeah, so your moon is trying your Pluto. So your moon again also has this sort of like past life um, quality to it, and it's like kind of helping out, like it's like maybe a Pluto. One way, if you want to create a story around it, who knows if it's true, but one way you can kind of create a story around it is that your Pluto indicates some like a heavier piece of karma that you really have to complete, especially
Mm,
because it's your north node. But your a recent life, a more recent life than the heavy karma one, which indicated by your moon in Aries, is kind of giving you the like the Aries quality, fire, power, um, warrior like energy that will help to give you the qualities that you need so that you can actually complete the unfinished karma that you've got
mm.
going on with Pluto conjunct your North Node. Um, so yeah, if you're interested, those listening, I would say yeah, your Moon, Pluto, and South Node are really powerful things to kind of look at when trying to understand your
Mm.
chart and past life stuff, which is super fascinating.
So cool. Thank you so much for
Mhm.
sharing that. And oh my gosh, it's just been awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're such a treasure trove of wisdom, truly.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much for having me here.
Ah, I've loved it. I've loved chatting with you. And yeah, for those who are curious to get to know you and your work more, who want to work with you, where can we find you?
Well, I think Instagram is usually the best. My handle is Krista Marie Star, star with two R's. Um, and yeah, I'll have some like online course happening soon with more like wisdom studies and not necessarily astrology based. I might have a tarot course coming out in the
Mm,
next like 6 months. I'm still
mm,
developing it, but I would love to get that out so that people have a
mhm,
way of learning tarot because it's another one of my
mm.
favorite modalities.
Yes.
And then um, I have a university degree. I went to university. I have a degree in philosophy, and I have studied
Mhm,
different forms of esoteric and orthodox religion and spirituality for most of my life. And so I've got like a wisdom course coming out called The Well of Wisdom. That's just like these deep, deep esoteric and life teachings that help us to navigate things. So you can kind of look out for that. And aside from that, yeah, you can reach out to me through Instagram to book a session or a reading or um, yeah, follow me on there. And I've got I usually post different things about whether it's just inspired writing or some form of teaching.
mm. Amazing. Yeah. Krista comes as such a highly recommended tarot reader as well. I feel like that's how I first came to know you. But I feel like we knew each other through the community. But
Yeah,
yeah, I've
yeah,
recommended people to you for tarot and they've loved
mm,
it.
yeah. It's a powerful tool. I love it too.
And
Hmm.
you're powerful as well.
Tell the
Yeah.
Scorpio.
Yes, all that Scorpio baby.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Krista.
You're so welcome, Tamar.